The flight was supposed to be ordinary, a routine hop between cities that had seen thousands of aircraft rise and vanish into the clouds before. On that bright morning, the air over Denver was crisp, the horizon perfectly clear, and Flight 306 stood ready for departure. Captain Ryan Keller checked his watch, the same old silver piece his father had given him when he earned his wings. He was proud but tired. 20 years in the cockpit had given him calm eyes and the habit of listening to silence. Beside him sat First Officer Mia Tan, sharp, focused, and quietly ambitious. It was her first major flight as the designated second-in-command. She double-checked every switch with a kind of reverence, the way new pilots do when they still feel the hum of possibility in every takeoff. The passengers filed in, 72 strangers carrying 72 small universes of hope and routine. A musician heading to Los Angeles for his first recording session, a teacher visiting her sister, a father promising his daughter they would see the Pacific before sunset. Nothing about the moment suggested history was waiting in the wings. At 7:48 a.m., Flight 306 rolled down the runway, its engines rising to a deep metallic roar. The city shrank beneath them, the mountains stretching like ancient guardians below the clouds. The flight path was simple. Denver to Sacramento, just over 2 hours. Ryan eased the jet into its climb, leveling at 37,000 feet. The morning light filled the cockpit. For a while, there was only calm air, light conversation, and the steady rhythm of flight. An hour in, Mia noticed something strange, a slight fluctuation in the right engine's temperature gauge. It wasn't alarming, just a flicker, maybe a sensor glitch. She logged it, as procedure demanded, but Ryan noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Just a reading spike?" "Probably nothing." Ryan smiled. "Nothing is always something. Keep an eye on it." The air grew thinner and the world below blurred into a tapestry of pale gold and green. Then, 20 minutes later, the warning light blinked again, longer this time. The engine hummed unevenly, a vibration deep enough to be felt through the pedals. Mia's brow furrowed. "Captain, right engine temp's climbing fast. Pressure unstable." Ryan leaned forward, scanning the displays. "Okay, let's reduce thrust on 2. He adjusted, waiting for the numbers to settle. They didn't. Instead, the alarm tone cut through the cockpit. In the cabin, passengers felt a jolt, mild but sharp enough to stir murmurs. The seatbelt sign chimed. Ryan stayed calm. "Let's shut down 2 before it takes the other with it." He began the checklist with the practiced rhythm of a man who had done this before. The right engine wound down, the noise softening until it was gone. They were flying on one, stable but compromised. "We'll divert to Salt Lake," Ryan said. Mia radioed air traffic control, her voice composed. "Salt Lake Center. Flight 306 declaring an emergency. Engine 2 shut down. Request priority landing." The controller responded quickly, rerouting them to the nearest airfield. But as Ryan began the slow descent, another vibration rippled through the airframe. The good engine, the left one, coughed once. Mia's eyes widened. "Captain." "Left engine torque fluctuating." Ryan didn't answer at first, his gaze fixed on the gauges as if willing them to hold. Then he said quietly, "We've got limited power. Let's prepare for worst case." The passengers didn't know details, only that the captain's voice came over the speakers, steady and reassuring. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered a mechanical issue and will be landing shortly. Please remain seated and follow crew instructions." A few people looked at each other, uneasy. A mother held her child's hand tighter. The musician closed his eyes, repeating something under his breath. Maybe a prayer, maybe a promise. At 8:53 a.m., both engines failed completely. Silence, unnatural and absolute, filled the cabin. Only the rush of wind remained. Ryan's training took over. Best glide speed set, flaps up. Battery power on. Mia worked beside him, checking the restart sequence. The engines refused to respond. The aircraft descended in long, graceful arcs toward a vast stretch of forested ridges below. Ryan opened the radio channel again. "Mayday, Mayday, Flight 306, dual engine failure, attempting glide to terrain." The reply came faint through static. "Flight 306, radar contact, altitude "23,000 descending fast," Ryan said. "Any clear terrain ahead?" There was a pause. Then the controller's voice broke with static. "Nearest open field 12 miles east. Grid Sierra, Charlie 49. Ryan calculated instantly. They could make it, maybe. He banked slightly, eyes flicking between the falling altitude and the gray horizon. In those next 8 minutes, something extraordinary happened. The panic in the cabin softened. The crew moved among the passengers with calm efficiency, securing loose items, speaking gently. Ryan thought of his family waiting in Seattle, of his father's watch ticking on his wrist. Mia's hands trembled once, then steadied. "We've got glide," she whispered. "We can make it." He nodded, his voice low. "We'll give her everything she's got." The trees below grew closer, the sunlight breaking through clouds in shifting patterns. Ryan aimed for a narrow valley, flat enough to serve as an emergency strip. The controls resisted. The hydraulics were failing from lack of pressure. He fought the stick, coaxing the plane like a wounded bird toward safety. "Brace," he said into the intercom. "Brace, brace, brace!" The impact was fierce but short. The landing gear sheared away on contact, the fuselage sliding across grass and dirt before coming to a stop near a riverbed. Inside, cries and confusion filled the cabin, but the structure held. Ryan and Mia moved fast. Power down, fuel lines cut, emergency doors open. Smoke curled from the right wing but didn't ignite. Passengers stumbled into daylight, coughing but alive. The aftermath unfolded in slow motion. Emergency crews found them within an hour, guided by the beacon that had somehow survived the crash. Out of 72 souls, 69 lived. It was called a miracle by some, a near disaster by others. Ryan refused interviews, retreating into quiet anonymity. But investigators soon discovered something no one expected. The right engine's failure wasn't random. A design flaw in the fuel pump allowed air bubbles to form during rapid altitude changes. A tiny, overlooked imperfection that could starve the engine mid-flight. Worse, the left engine's shutdown revealed that under certain conditions, a safety valve could jam, preventing restart. The combination was catastrophic, and it might have existed in dozens of aircraft worldwide. For months, engineers pored over data from Flight 306. Ryan and Mia testified before the review board, describing the sequence with precision. The manufacturer at first resisted the findings, but the evidence was undeniable. Within a year, every aircraft of that model underwent major redesign. The new fuel system, pressure regulators, and dual-line redundancy became standard worldwide. It was called the Keller-Tan Protocol, named not by the pilots themselves, but by those who survived because of them. Mia visited the crash site a year later. Nature had already reclaimed it. Grass sprouting through scorched soil, a small plaque placed by survivors. She knelt beside it, tracing the engraved words, "In the silence after fear, courage speaks." She remembered Ryan's calm voice in the cockpit, the steady hands that refused to let chaos win. He had retired quietly months after the investigation ended, content to let the sky belong to others. Among the passengers, stories spread like ripples. The musician whose guitar had been shattered wrote a song called Altitude, which became an anthem of resilience. The teacher began speaking publicly about gratitude. The father who once promised his daughter the Pacific finally took her there. They stood by the water holding hands, and she told him she wanted to be a pilot. Years passed. In aviation schools, instructors replayed the data from Flight 306, teaching new pilots about decision-making, teamwork, and calm under pressure. They studied not only what failed, but what worked. The choices that kept the aircraft stable enough to land. The discipline that kept fear from turning to chaos. One instructor summed it up best. Flight 306 didn't just crash. It taught us how to fly safer. Ryan never sought recognition. When reporters tracked him down for the 10th anniversary, he declined interviews but sent a short statement. "We were only doing our jobs. If what we learned saved others, that's all the thanks we need." His words were simple, but every aviation boardroom kept a framed copy as a reminder of humility and responsibility. The changes inspired by the accident spread far beyond one aircraft type. Regulators adopted new redundancy rules across all commercial fleets. Engine manufacturers introduced layered diagnostics that could predict failure before it occurred. Cockpit training added scenarios based on Flight 306, emphasizing trust between captain and first officer. The result was measurable. In the decade that followed, mid-air engine failure incidents dropped by more than 60%. LI survivors of Flight 306 held a reunion 20 years later in Sacramento. They gathered under clear skies, sharing memories, photographs, and laughter softened by time. Ryan, older now, attended quietly.